A company that purchased the intellectual property of defunct retailers RadioShack, Pier 1 Imports, Dress Barn, Model Sporting Goods, and the Franklin Mint now stands accused of doing something very shady. That company, Retail E-Commerce Ventures, REV, is now being sued by the Securities and Exchange Commission, which claims the company defrauded its investors out of $112 million using a Ponzi-style scheme.
So Radio Shack's back in the news, and not because anyone needed a 9-volt battery at 11 p.m., because the guys who rescued Radio Shack were allegedly running a Ponzi scheme. And we're going to talk about all things Radio Shack. And we got Marc Boucher in the house today.
Hello, Scott. How are you?
I'm good, man. The news just keeps coming. All of our icons. We had a mouse arrested last month.
Yeah, that was funny.
So, now Radio Shack's in the news. What are Rubik's cubes that have become cancerous? What's going on?
Fill me in. What happened? So you told me that you said the two guys that were rescuing Radio Shack. What were they just trying to bring it back?
It was some kind of financial group in Miami, Florida. Of course, Florida.
Yeah.
And they had raised $112 million to bring back Radio Shack online. I think there were stores planned as well. Turns out they would rather have the money than put it into the stores. It was a Ponzi scheme. Now, for everybody, you hear that term a lot after Madoff. Ponzi scheme is simply taking in money under the guise of...
Let me describe it. Let me see if I understand what it is. Here's what I think a Ponzi scheme is. I think it's when you get investors, you have some kind of idea. You get investors and they give you a bunch of money and you say, we'll have a return on your investment by October 30th. October 30th comes and goes and you're like, man, it's going so great, but I need more money. And they're like, they believe you. So they give you more money. And eventually you get a whole bunch, but you actually have nothing going on. And then one day you just vanish with all their money.
That is a big part of it. What the original Ponzi guy did was he would pay off investors to keep priming the pump. Like they were seeing this is really working. And he would pay investors with new money that came in. And so it was
so he'd get new investors and he'd just give them their money.
And like you said, he would get money from original investors as well because they're saying, gosh, this thing's working great. Well, it's not. It's all just a house of cards. And so when it falls, it falls. And Radio Shack fell again. And it's the weirdest thing. So a little background here on this kind of thing. It's a new phenomenon, old brands coming back to life, like Frankenstein and these things. I got a catalog. Gosh, it was 6 or 7 years ago. It wasn't a catalog as much as it was like 4 slicks of magazine paper stapled and folded like a weekly reader.
Yeah.
And it said Montgomery Ward, and it had the logo. And Montgomery Ward? What? We bought an old VCR from there in '84. Like what? They're gone.
We bought a VCR from a Sears catalog way back when. Right. I remember that.
So
remember those Sears catalogs?
Do what?
Remember the Sears catalogs? I remember them fondly.
Of course I do.
Or fondly.
Yeah, I don't. No one needs that. Yeah. So I got this catalog, so to speak, and it's an old brand name. Well, somebody had just bought the name Montgomery Ward and slapped some cheap Temu products in it and are selling it under, a 100-year-old name that generations of Americans knew. That has nothing to do with the original company. That's kind of what went on here. It was going to be Radio Shack, the logo and everything, but I don't know that Tandy had a hand in this. Fort Worth, I think, was headquartered.
But Radio Shack is still around as a company. I mean, at least as of a few months ago, there was 2 or 3 of them here in Florida still, like actual brick and mortar shops.
I read that the last one shut down in Maryland, so maybe I don't know if. Okay, now I know that they had franchises, and I think some of those might still be hanging on.
I could be wrong. Yeah, and there were franchises when I worked for Radio Shack in the 80s, and the one I worked for was was a corporate one. It was a corporate one.
Uh-huh.
But then I'd travel around and, I'd see Radio Shacks in other states, and I'd walk in, and it was obviously a franchise store because it looked different. They could do a lot more. They had a lot more freedom with how they.
Let me tell you about that freedom. I worked at a cell phone store in Oklahoma, and there's a crummy little town to the west of the metro area. Sorry for anybody that lives there. It's called El Reno, and they had a Radio Shack there that I had to deliver junk to every once in a while. And it was a Radio Shack, but they sold everything that wasn't just Radio Shack branded stuff.
Yeah, they'd have like Panasonic and other brands they would sell there too.
Yeah. In the back of the store, they were raising tropical fish, and they sold those. I swear to you, like it was wall-to-wall aquariums, and they had like $800 fish in there. And I went back there one time with him. I said, what is this? And he says, yeah, it supplements the income we sell to pet shops. And okay. So yeah, let's just say they had a lot of latitude to run the store as they wanted to.
Yeah, the franchises looked like a pretty cool place to work.
So when you worked there, what did you do?
I was a salesman. I was a geeky little high school kid with the tie on that would, can I help you find something today? What are you looking for?
What did you pitch the battery of the month club?
Oh, we had those little cards. You would like sign a little card, and on the back you would, it would be like a punch card, and then you get actually they had those little red and green batteries that you should come in and get for free whenever you wanted.
I don't remember that.
I forgot about the battery of the month. Yeah.
I just remember if you could have somehow bought a lawn chair there, they would have asked you if you needed batteries. Like they pitched those batteries.
Well, it's kind of like, food at the movie theater.
Well, but it was like Netflix because you had to go in there and get your new batteries every month because you're a member of the club.
Yeah.
They're going to take it from you.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Okay.
No, it wasn't every day. You had a card every month on the same day. You could come in and that you would, the salesman would check the back of the card and, just like a pizza place where you come in 10 times, you get a free pizza, that kind of thing. Except every month they'd give you batteries. And they were cheap. Remember back in the day, there was alkaline batteries and there were carbon batteries, and the carbon batteries weren't worth a crap.
Yeah, they weighed, they were like air. They were so light because there's nothing to them.
And their capacity was nothing. And
they were called
that we gave away.
They were called heavy duty, ironically.
Yeah. Yeah, they were crapping, so we gave them away.
So talk to people about the store itself. Like, I know that this generation, Gen Z and even millennials, don't understand what this store is. So in a nutshell, it's Best Buy, but it's tiny. And they don't have 500 different kinds of everything and no big appliances and stuff. It was truly an electronics store. And like its heyday in the 60s, kids were buying transistors and, it was the only place, it was like a hobby shop, but that was probably the peak.
Yeah, no, you pretty much summed it up. I mean, it was back in the day, it was just magical to walk into a Radio Shack as a kid. And even more so would be like when, your mom or your brother or sister wanted to go to the mall and hang out with their friends and just walk around. I would spend that entire 2 hours in the Radio Shack at the mall.
It's unfortunate.
And I knew exactly where the mall Radio Shack, I would go. Well, it was totally. But I'd be in there looking at.
That's a shame.
I would look at police scanners, and they had the best ones back. The Uniden police scanners back then were just cat's meow. And then of course, the cell phones came out. They had the big suitcase cell phone, and that was a big deal back then. Radio Shack was one of the.
The place smelled like solder and like faintly burned plastic and carpet
and lost goals.
And clear cell.
Yeah. The acne cream almost overpowered the solder. Yeah. Well, you're not wrong.
So, yeah. So the what happened here is they tried to revive this thing in a world of Amazon and Instacart bringing you anything you need from Best Buy immediately. And just, I mean, they were at the Consumer Electronics Show this year. They had new owners, the wall full of cables, and big smiles, shaking hands. I assume they were trying to get investors there.
Oh, the wall full of cables and adapters. That was the other thing. You could get any adapters to adapt anything to anything. I once adapted stereo RCA jacks to a female garden hose, all with parts from RadioShack.
Yeah, I buy that. We had a contraption one time that would take RCA jacks, VCR tapes, and record them down to CD. Like if you just needed the audio from it, like you're right, you could get anything there.
I remember old school VCRs too. They used to have that A-dub button on the front, and what you could do is you could take any movie or any VCR and record only audio over the existing video. So you could plug a microphone into it or something. Yeah, It was audio dub, and you could just replace the audio track with something new. Oh, mayhem, pretty much. So I would rent movies. I'd go to Blockbuster and I'd rent Top Gun, and I would come back home, right? And I would get to a point in the movie where, like, I don't know, the protagonist is trying to convince the antagonist that he's right about something, right? Standard plot twist. And all of a sudden, the next person to rent the movie would all of a sudden hear the movie go quiet, and then you'd hear me, he's full of shit. And then the audio would come back on again.
That's they have records of who recorded it or who rented it last.
But how many people rented it before that person and just didn't say anything? There's no way to actually track that back. I never got questioned. Nobody ever questioned anything. I mean, I honestly owed them money for probably 50 movies that I ruined.
All right. Yeah. Just a little background, everybody. This is a national show. Marc showed up to work. We used to work together. Marc showed up to work one day, and we had a big, huge corporate sales floor with cubicles, rows. And at the end of each row or every other row, they had a wall-mounted TV where we could see the news stories or anything. There was something that captivated the whole floor. I don't know what it was.
I remember
some kind of news.
It was a high-speed chase, I think, in Los Angeles.
Well, Marc reaches into his backpack and pulls out some nerd super remote and turned off every television. And everybody's freaking out. Like, what? No. And Marc's just sitting there, Exhibit A. Marc's just sitting there cackling like a dork and like unafraid of the ass whooping that would come to him if we found out. And like he looked over at me and held it up and shook it like, it's me. And so the managers went over there, turned the TVs on remotely by hand every time. And he didn't do it, to his credit, he didn't do it again until everybody settled in and was watching the chase, and then click, and they all went off, and everybody's freaking out. Like, God. Like Revenge of the Nerd.
It's even better. Well, that's because that's the right way to do it. You can't just do it immediately after they turn all the TVs back on. You have to wait for it to be the most painful point.
Is there a handbook?
Another place I did it. Do you have Buffalo Wild Wings up where you are?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a great place to go watch football games because every game is usually on at a Buffalo Wild Wings. You see where I'm going with this?
I do.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I still have that remote. It is on it's actually the same remote from that day. Still works. It's the same batteries. It still works just fine. And what it looks, it's just a little keychain thing. And, all remotes, 99% of TV remotes work on infrared. So it's line of sight, and it's just a blinky light that blinks at a certain code. And there's maybe 10 different codes that all TVs have. So it would you push the button and aim it at a wall of televisions, and it would just cycle through all 10 codes. And one by one, they would just all turn off. Sometimes 2 or 3 of them at a time, sometimes just one up. So I would go to Buffalo Wild Wings, and you just wait until it's like, the tiebreaker kick. It's like the wild card game, and it's the field goal that's going to make a team one. If this team makes it, it's going to win by 1 point in overtime, right? Blink.
When's the last time you've done that?
It's been a couple of years, because when I did that, I honestly got scared that they would figure out it was me. Because Scott, they were. Yeah, I've never seen an entire. I thought a riot. It was.
Did you stand up and start throwing things and demanding the TV get back on? Just to blend in?
No, that would have made sense. I didn't. I just sat there fearing for my life. Couldn't leave because I hadn't paid for my food yet, so I couldn't just walk out.
Blessed are the peacemakers.
Yes.
Oh my God. So are we nostalgic for Radio Shack, or just being 14 and taking your Walkman, convinced you can build a robot in the garage out of spare parts?
I think it's a little of both. I mean, Radio Shack represents the 80s, and nostalgia for the 80s is just nostalgia for the 80s, and Radio Shack had the sights and smells that just brings you right back. So it is both.
I think I'm nostalgic to have a 1,500 square foot place with only one kind of HDMI cable, instead of the labyrinth you have to go through to, like, Best Buy or the big stores now.
Yeah, I hate navigating Best Buy.
Hey everyone, quick message. If you enjoy the podcast, do us a favor and forward it to your friends who you think would enjoy it too. Please hit up our Facebook page at Free Nights and Weekends, X, Instagram. Add your comments. They're always welcome. The more people we reach, the bigger the community gets, and the machines that figure this kind of thing out know when to get our podcast in front of new listeners. Also, hit us up wherever you normally get podcasts. And if you enjoy the show, write us a review. That helps as well. All right, back at it. To Radio Shack for some reason. I don't know what got into me this week. All right, finish up strong. Let's go. We did a show earlier about early computing. We did the TRS-80, which is, of course, the Radio Shack Tandy product. Were you working there when they had those?
Oh, yeah. They had just come out with a version of it was the Tandy 1000, which was their PC clone. They were still selling the Color Computer 3 too, the Coco 3. But they were selling also the sort of the next version of the Tandy 1000, and they were labeling it as multimedia, and that was like the new catchphrase. And it had a CD-ROM drive, and you could pop a CD-ROM in there and see these awful little computer animations, and it was the coolest thing that ever happened.
Floating toasters.
Yeah, the screensaver. Yeah,
I get it.
But it was a good time. I loved working there. I got fired from there.
How did you get fired from Radio Shack?
I've never told this story. And I've got a lot of good stories. I've never told this one.
Hey, you've got a lot of stories.
I've got a ton of stories.
Yeah, you do. You said a lot of good stories.
Oh, I see where you went with that. Yeah. All right. Well, let's see what this one is. So,
grab bag.
It's a grab. Let's watch. So I was working at and back then they didn't have registers. Okay, we had a cash drawer with a little secret code. There was like different pull tabs for your fingers that you'd pull the first one and the third one, and then you could open the cash drawer. And it was just we didn't have registers at all. Everything was done with a calculator, and we had paper slips. And I'm sure you remember these days. If you went in there to buy a 9-volt battery, they wanted your name and address and everything. And we'd write it down on a slip. And we'd take the money, and we had to be smart enough to figure out how to make change. Those days are gone.
Right.
So we would just make change. And so after about a year of working there I started doing 2 illegal things. One was I would let my friends come in and just take shit. Turns out they weren't into that. So that was the first thing. And, like my buddy would come in and I'd let him it was a car alarm system. I just let him walk out with it. I don't know, looking back, I don't know where I was thinking with that, because now there's something from inventory that's missing that wasn't paid for, where'd it go? So the other thing that I figured out though, and I started taking money out of the cash register, but it was only ever to buy lunch at the Chinese place next door. That was the only reason I ever took money out of the thing. But what I would do is if at the end of the day, when they reconcile everything, if there was one of those slips missing, right, and the drawer was off by a certain amount, we all just assumed, well, we can't find the slip. That's probably what it was. It was probably that slip that's missing, and that would have balanced it all out. So, oh well. And so I would take money out of the drawer and go eat lunch, and then I would just lose a slip. And I would always make sure to take out weird amounts of money, so the drawer wasn't short $20.
Oh my God. It took them 2 years to get wise to that?
No, probably 6 months. I was probably doing this for about 6 months. It was a while after I'd been working. I started doing all this crazy. I would take like $6.72 out, right, and then lose a slip. And they're like, it was probably a thing. And also, I would learn too that if you buy a pack of batteries and an adapter, it comes out to $14.12. So I would use that number because it was a commonly used number. Anyway, one day, I'll never forget, manager's name was Russ, and I loved this guy. He was a big, huge guy, and he drove a Yugo.
Nice.
Yeah, he drove a Yugo. And he was a super guy, and I really felt horrible afterwards, because I wronged the guy. He was the manager. But anyway, came into work one day, and he's like, hey, can we talk to you in the back in the office for a second? I was like, yeah. So I walked back there, and there's a cop standing there. Yeah. And they proceeded to show me the surveillance video from the investigator that was out in the parking lot for the past few weeks.
Oh,
yeah. So I didn't get arrested. I had to sign and it wasn't a lot of money. It was a lot of money back to me back then. It was like $1,200. They figured I owed him or something like that. But I had to sign a promissory note, and they let me go.
That's a lot of Chinese food. He was in a Yugo because he never hit his sales numbers to get his bonus.
Right.
Yeah. And there's a reason for that.
Right. all those beef and broccolis kept coming out of the cash drawer.
Right. I guess. I don't miss the place the way you do. But I don't know. There's some nostalgia there. I mean, the Shack lives. Only, the same way the McRib lives. It shows up every now and then, confuses everybody, and then just kind of disappears. They filed bankruptcy twice, I think, between 2015 and 2017. It's like a washed up rock band announcing their final tour and then showing up at the state fair 2 months later.
Yep. Yeah. RadioShack is still a company. They still have a website that still sells all the same things: chargers, batteries, AM, FM, clock radios.
Clock radios.
Yeah.
VCR rewinders.
Yeah, right. Because you got to be kind.
Here's the deal with that. I remember in the slow decline where they kind of tried to become a cell phone store.
Yeah.
I was in the cell phone business at the time with a national carrier. When they reinvented themselves, there were like 50 different carriers, and they were all being pitched by, the one cashier that didn't steal from the company. And to get out of there with a phone was like a hostage negotiation. Like so many options. I think they just spent a lot of time scrambling to find their place and just never did.
Yeah, as technology improved and more stores, because it used to be RadioShack was the only place where you could get a lot of that stuff.
Right.
But then when the Best Buys and those other places came by, then, they had, although that RadioShack, aside from maybe Granger, it was the only place you could go and buy resistors and capacitors and, IC chips and that kind of thing. You remember were you ever into electronics? Did you ever build your own stuff and like solder crap together and all that?
No.
I remember one of the staple components of almost everything that I ever built was the 555 timer chip. It was just like a standard timer chip that it was a clock, basically. So that whatever you were making could have a time base to use as a standard for whatever else it was doing. So everything had that chip. And
I blame RadioShack for that drawer in the kitchen with all the adapters and dead batteries. Like that all came from RadioShack.
Yeah, it did. But I mean, as I'm standing here right now, I can smell RadioShack, and you kind of alluded to that earlier, and you're not wrong.
Yeah, there's a strong carpet smell for some reason. I can't, if you've been, So these brand rehabs, it's cultural real estate more than anything. You're buying a brand and a logo and memories of, when it was an actual place. It's just not.
Well, I mean, that's why you buy cars from your childhood too. I mean, everybody does that when they go through a midlife crisis. Someday I'm going to have I would love to have a Pontiac Fiero from 1986 someday,
Yeah. I think the Fieras are all being chopped up for kit cars for Lambos.
Yeah. They're all Ferraris and Lambos now.
Well, kind of. Are they?
They're
Four-cylinder,
the versions that you and I can have. Yeah.
4-cylinder Pontiac Ferraris.
No, there's people putting in the Ferrari GT, which was the one that had the 6-cylinder. There's people putting like Chevy LS V8 motors in those things.
Yeah, Fieras had car speakers in the seats behind the headrest.
Did they really?
Yeah.
That's pretty
none
cool.
of this is advancing the story of RadioShack, by the way.
No, but still, it's advancing the story of nostalgia, which is,
I guess,
adjacent. Yeah,
it is adjacent. You're right.
It is RadioShack adjacent.
What we haven't mentioned yet is one of the best pieces of media it ever done. Remember the 2014 Super Bowl ad?
No, what was it for? Was it for RadioShack?
Yes, two guys are in the RadioShack, and the phone rings, and he hangs up and looks kind of puzzled and says, "The 80s called. They want their store back." And then in piles just every icon from the decade: Kid and Play, Mary Lou Retton.
I have seen that ad. You know what? I saw that ad yesterday.
Really?
Yes, I was looking for old ads just to kind of, to research this podcast.
Yes.
And I found some really, really good ones on there, but I did see that one too. And I realized it was a more modern ad.
Well, it was, 2014. So basically it was the store's obituary. Like, this is when we were great. We're going to try to revive this, but it's not going to work. We're going to put some glasses on a weekend at Bernie's and try to resuscitate a few more years out of this thing, but they just couldn't. And
I think a big part of their demise as well is just the death of brick and mortar as a concept.
Yeah.
That's just the way things are going.
And wise ass store clerks that robbed them blind for Mugu Gaipan.
Mm-hmm. The same.
All right. I wonder if we've taught anything, or if there's been a moral to this story.
I think the moral to this story is, if you have a RadioShack now, make the most of it. Like, if you have your equivalent, I'm serious, whatever your RadioShack is, right? It's clear what RadioShack meant to you and me, but there's 18-year-old kids out there and 25-year-olds and 30-year-olds who have whatever RadioShack was to us, to them. And, society and technology and the way commerce works is changing faster now than it did between RadioShack and us, in today. So if you got your own version of what RadioShack was to us, embrace it. And, while it's still here.
You think in 30 years, there's going to be a couple of old dudes sitting around talking about how great TikTok was?
I think they're going to be talking about how great water was. Hey man, you remember water?
Vaguely. My mom used to talk about it. Yeah. I don't know. I don't want to every week, like, trudge through, in my day, we used to do this, but in my day, we used to do a lot of stuff that you just can't do.
We did do a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, there was so much, man. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. As long as we don't fall into a rabbit hole if that's all we do.
Right.
But, I mean, but that's a big part of it. And as you get older too, part of some of my favorite things to do in my mid 50s is reminisce with friends and look at, old videos. And,
I was just thinking, as long as we don't get up in the morning and throw on a concert shirt and tight roll your jeans. And then I thought, I could use a day of that. That wouldn't be so bad.
Yeah. Pull my green and orange striped tube socks all the way up to my knees.
Right. Get a job at a failing electronics store and rob them. All right. That's what we've become here. Mark, I couldn't have done this without you. I probably shouldn't have done it with you, but we're done. We did it.
Someday you'll learn, Scott. Someday you'll learn.
Hey, I got to tell you something. Last week, we did a show about the state fair, me and a couple of yahoos from Oklahoma. And oh my gosh, it went over really big. Got a bunch of great comments. And that's the lifeblood of this podcast. Anybody with any recollections of RadioShack, I'm sure will pile in this week, and I'll get notes from all over. And that has been gratifying and very fun. That it's connective tissue. Like, somebody remembers that and it sparks a lot of conversations. That part's cool.
Yeah, totally.
I love it. All right, get to work, Marcus.
It's a Radio Shack Merry Christmas.
America shops at Radio Shack for everything in radios. Radios for wake-ups, sit-ups, weathercasts, newscasts, CBers, CDers, shortwavers, space savers, stereo mates, playmates, radios that are wettable, petable, and simply unforgettable.
Tune in to hundreds of Christmas gift ideas from the leader in radio technology since 1921. A radio for every purpose at every price at Radio Shack, the technology store.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Scott. Puberty's kicking in.
Yeah, thank God. It's about time.
Man. All right, I'm going to go count my pubes. I'll see you later.
Yeah.